Welcome to my short presentation about the Ansible part of the first lab in network automation. I will talk about some adjustments I made, for example to the services YAML file. Then I will show the structure of my inventory, the playbook that I made, which does everything, the Jinja 2 templates that I use, and finally the output, the configuration files that get produced and pushed to the edge routers. So let's start with the adjustments that I made. There's one additional line needed in the Ansible configuration files. There is another way to do this, but I decided to use the do syntax in my Jinja 2 template, and by default this isn't enabled, so this line is needed in the configuration file for Ansible. I will show you when I use this, where I use this afterwards. Then I made some changes to the services YAML. It's mostly the same, but I did some tweaks to make it easier. It's mainly for the site A, which is dual homed. Normally for single homed site, it's easy. You get this IP and make an interface on the edge router. But for the dual homed site, this is the virtual IP for the HSRP protocol. So I need some other real IPs which the edge routers can use, one for each router. So I defined them here. The primary IP for the first edge router and the secondary for the second edge router, and this will then be the virtual IP. And the other stuff is still the same. I also did it down here, of course, for customer B. Now let's talk about the inventory. I made a separate directory called inventory, so not everything is in the top level and it's better structured. In there I have my inventory YAML, of course, where I made an all group with some children. There I split it up into types, so if it's a router or if it's a Linux machine, whatever. These aren't really needed for the lab, but I use them for testing and stuff, so I let them in there. In the routers, I have another group, children, where I split them up even further by their function. So are they core router or an edge router? Again, core routers aren't really needed for the lab, but I let them in there. And the important part is are the edge routers, where I have split them up even further by location, which makes it easy in the Jinja template, which we'll look at after. So I can make the configs for the appropriate routers. And in here I split them up for site A, B, etc. Then I made a directory called hostvars. In there I made a new layer where I made where there's a folder per host. So as you can see, edge 1, 2. So there is one directory per host, and in there I have YAML files for each category. For example, connection, which just contains the IP, but I also made a second one for configuration, for example, because I saved the loopback, I defined the loopback address in here. If it's a HSRP router, the priority, and if it's the primary or secondary. And the others have HSRP false. There's also a group var directory with an all YAML, not needed here. I only need it for the routers. with vars and vault YAML. In the vars, I defined the variables which I use for the connection, the user, the password, what type. But as you can see, I use the Jinja2 syntax because the actual value of the variable is saved in the vault. I can also show you this quickly right here, so I can edit or show the vault, inventory, routers, vault, then type in my master password, and there you can see the different variables. So let's talk about the playbooks. There's a separate directory for all playbooks. It contains some I used for testing to gather facts and learn all SSH keys. But the relevant one for this task is the MPLS services playbook. It does everything that's needed for this task, and I will go through every step quickly. So it runs on all edge routers, loads in the services YAML, so it's available for the other tasks that need it and for the template. I then get some information, retrieve some information from the routers. I need the VRFs and the interfaces. This is needed so I can remove things that aren't defined anymore in the services file. So I use iOS command or facts to get the relevant information. These two tasks belong to the information I get above because I need it in a better format because it's not really usable only with this. I need to put it in a list so I get the output with some regex magic that took some time. I get the first word from every line, so only the name of the VRF, and skip the title. The same I do for the interfaces and put them in a list. Then there's the important stuff where I create the templates. So I use Jinja2 for this, and the template module, this gets executed on the local host. So I need to delegate it, and basically takes the template, the removal template or the configuration template, and makes one and creates it with the host name, the current host name of the current edge router. So I get a deletion config and a normal config. And this then gets applied with the iOS config module, and it gets the correct config with the host name. And I made some tags. I will show you why afterwards. And just as a little backstory, in the beginning I made everything with the respective modules from the iOS collection. So there's one to create VRFs, one to create interfaces, etc. But there were multiple problems. For example, I couldn't define encapsulation and other things were not possible. So I decided to rewrite everything after a few days and just use the iOS config and make one big config file with Jinja2. I'll now show you how the playbook works. Currently I'm using the default config with customer A and B. There aren't any configurations currently, and I'll execute the playbook, ask for the vault password, define inventory and the playbook. It will run, it will create configurations now, it will show changed, but it should apply nothing because idempotency works. Yeah, didn't apply, but it generated the configurations. If I run it again, everything will be green. Come on. It's a bit slow right now. Okay, everything green, nothing changed. So you can see it's the default config, customer A, B, 2 standbys on edge 2. I can now show it how it removes and that it also creates stuff. So customer C is added, customer B is removed. I will run the playbook again. It will change the configs and also apply stuff. Changed only for 3 and 4, for 1 and 2, sorry. Alright, as I've been brief, so you can see customer C is now defined, B is deleted. This will only go away when the router is reloaded. Show VRF, B is gone, C is there, and show standby. That's the one from A, that's the one from customer C, and can also show it right here. Show IP in brief. Here it is defined, and SO VRF customer C gets created. Can also show that the routes get imported. So IP route VRF star. So you can see customer A, which is still defined with its routes, management, B is deleted, and then there should be customer C. Yeah, you can see the connected one and the local one, and the one it learned from BGP right here. Sometimes you may only want to create the configs but not apply them, to check them first or for whatever reason. So I made some tags called apply config, and then you can execute the playbook with the skip tags option and say apply config should get skipped, and now it will only create them and not apply them. Generated, no apply steps. I'll now quickly show the Ginger 2 templates that I use. There's one for the configuration, so for the adding of stuff, and one for the removal. So I'll quickly go through it. I will loop over each service and then over each site, which is defined per service. And then I check that the router only makes or gets a configuration that is intended for him. I do this by comparing the inventory host name with the site name, because the router is in the site group. So is, for example, edge 1 is in group site A. So with this I can make the association. Then I create the VRF. Some stuff I get from the services.yaml, some I get from the host variables. For example, the loopback address. I loop over the import and exports because multiple can be defined. Enable it for IPv4. Then I need to create an interface. It first checks if it's dual homed, and of course it loops over because there could be multiple defined. Checks if it's an dual homed, if it's HSRP router, because the configuration is a bit different. It needs to have this encapsulation definition, and it also chooses different IP. So the primary router chooses the primary IP, and the other one the secondary is the secondary IP, and the standard IP. So this one is used for the standby. It just splits, it removes the subnet mask. with the priority, which is also as a host variable defined. If it's not dual homed, it's a bit simpler. Name, IP, that's it. And then it distributes routes into BGP. Now the removal, as shown before, I get the facts here. Then the VRFs and the interfaces have to be deleted. So first of all, I compare the two lists. So for every VRF I get from the router, I loop through. If it's not defined in the services YAML and if it's not management, then it gets deleted, no VRF definition. The same for the interfaces. Here I had to do a bit of a workaround because I wasn't able to get them in a list with a clean syntax. So I loop through the services YAML through each interface, append it to this list I create in Jinja with the do syntax append. So I have a list of all interfaces. Then I loop through the lists of interfaces I get from the router. And if it's not in the list of interfaces from the services YAML, it gets deleted. I also made a check so important interfaces don't get deleted, for example loopback, and then it just deletes them. And now last but not least, I will show you the output of these templates. So it creates a normal config and a deletion config. So you can see this is just a valid iOS config file, VRF definition, the interface, this for customer A, so it's dual homed, BGP, same for customer C. So you can see if it's Edge 3, it's not dual homed, just creates the interface without the standby. And then there's also the deletion. I delete the customer B and its interface. Yeah, that's it.